So I'm very pleased to say that we have got another amazing guest on the Ale and Audio podcast. So you'll also be able to hear this on Ale and Radio as well, because we like to reuse the stuff we do for Ale and Audio on our new 24/7 streaming radio station, Ale and Radio 2. But I've got an amazing guest on. He is a craft beer and wine comedian, and it's James Dowdeswell. And the best thing is I've got a clip to play as we introduce him because he's brilliant. He puts these little shorts on. He's a craft beer comedian, but he puts some of the sort of short reels that he does onto Instagram, and you can see them on there. And he's definitely worth it. Next time he's touring and you get a chance to see him, go and visit him. But we're going to have a chat with him shortly. But I'm just going to play a little clip of the kind of stuff you can expect from him because it's absolutely brilliant. So yeah, here we go. Check this out.
For the week. 14 units. We're going to have 14 units of alcohol for the week. I'm thinking for the week. What's wrong? What about people who can take their alcohol? Well, we don't deal in units in this country, don't we? We don't even deal in words. In Bristol, deal in one word. How many did you have last night, Jonathan? I don't know. Shitloads.
So there we go. Oh, he's gone. The beauty of editing. So I'm very pleased to say that with us, we've got James Dowdeswell, comedian, craft beer and wine comedian. Here we go. How are you doing, James? You all right? Oh, sorry. Oh, it's all going well, isn't it? The beauty of editing. Let me start again. There we go. How are you doing, James?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Lovely to meet you in the flesh, so to speak, via the internet. This is one step closer. We've gone from Instagram to streaming. We'll meet in person one day.
Well, James, you first appeared on the Ale and Audio podcast a couple of months, I want to say maybe towards the start of this year, and it was in our Desert Island Beers feature when Joe, one of our podcast contributors from the Brew Club Hull, got in touch with you because he saw your stuff on Instagram, obviously the Lazy IPA beer that we'll be speaking about soon as well. But yeah, you came onto our Desert Island Beers. So that's where people can first hear you on the Ale and Audio podcast. But yeah, tell us about yourself then, because I know I know that you're a comedian. You starred appeared in one of my favourite comedies of all time as well. That was Extras, obviously. So tell us about your background and where this all started for you, and where things have led you, because now you've gone down this sort of craft beer comedian route, haven't you?
Yes. So I was born and brewed in a pub, so the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I started doing comedy in the late 90s, but one of my early routines was about the pub and rappers coming into a country pub, and so my comedy was always slightly linked to coming from a pub background. In 2007, I did a show about wine at the Edinburgh Festival, which was a lot of fun, which taught me how to take some sort of boring facts and turn them into comedy. And then in 2015, I did a show called The Perfect Pub up in Edinburgh. Basically, I asked the audience, what would you have in your perfect pub? And we built a perfect pub through improvisation. And then we named the pub at the end of the show. But unbeknownst to me, what I'd actually done was I'd done audience research, what everybody's perfect pub is. So I went away and I wrote a book rather, was initially called James Dowdeswell's Perfect Pub. Got it published by Camera, and they wanted to change it, make it more political, and so it became the Pub Manifesto. And while I was writing that book, the only chapter I was a little bit unsure about, because I was writing about toilets, I was writing about games, everything, I wasn't that confident on writing about beer because the craft beer movement had exploded. And I knew about cask beer, but not so much about craft beer. And so I started, when I was touring the book, doing book signings, I was going to all these beer festivals, and that really kicked off my love of beer, different craft beers. And from there, during lockdown, I was sent some beer to do some comedy for Lost and Grounded, and I did some stuff for them. And then more and more people started sending me beer, and then I met all these amazing people on Beerstagram, which is you're one of them, Jimbo.
Yeah.
And it sort of went from there. And I suddenly thought, hang on, I could do a show about beer. And so I came up with the idea of doing a show called Beers of a Clown. And to be honest, it's been the most fun stand-up show I've written to date. So that's currently what I'm starting to tour it around. But each time I do it, the show grows.
I can see it's one of those topics as well that doesn't necessarily run. You can't really run out of ideas because the
No.
thing with beer and pubs and things like that, it's just as we've been doing it on the podcast for ages as well. It just generates its own content constantly. So this is something that just could roll forever, really, couldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it could do, yeah, because it keeps updating and there's all sorts of different things. And for example, the first bit of material that I was really pleased with was actually about alcohol-free beer, because I was pushing against something. And of course, if you're in a brewery, that's almost the baddie. So it was really good fun. And then the next step was I started to put my beer material, when I was comparing, just drip feed it into my regular sets, regular club gigs, and it works. There's so much craft beer now for sale in pubs. I don't get too nerdy, but even when comparing, you can just say, "Oh, what are you drinking, fella?" And they might say, I don't know, whatever they say, Shipyard, and then that's an into talking about beer, and then I see how far I can push it. It's almost like, how in the old days comedians would be a bit blue and they see how far they can push it. I do that, but with beer.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah. I mean, I do like comedians when they've got like a theme. And one of the first times I remember going to see a comedian that kind of wasn't just talking about anything and everything. I think it was I went to see like a comedian who did a Football Manager set, and
Oh,
his whole set.
Tony Jameson.
It's got to have been the same guy.
Yeah, he's from Newcastle. He's a Villa fan. I'm a Villa fan.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say I've not seen that show. I've seen clips of it,
Oh.
but yeah, for those who like a certain thing, it really does lock into. But I mean, there's so many comedians around now. If you do niche down, it's a great thing.
Excellent. So for yourself then, and before obviously all the craft beer comedian stuff, you were appearing in different sketches and different things like that as well. So
Yeah.
going back to kind of like what you did with before all this, you've cropped up on the TV and everything, haven't you?
Yeah, I did crop up on the TV. I had sort of a little small run of it in the mid noughties. I was on Extras. I played the part of Count Fuckida on Extras, which actually, from a beer perspective, I ended up humping a beer barrel. So that was foreboding.
Brilliant. So yeah, I mean, it'd be daft not to ask, and I'm sure you get asked this before in the past, but did you obviously actually got to meet Ricky Gervais as well?
Yes, so how that all came about was in the late 90s, I was in Bristol and I was in a sitcom writing group with Stephen Merchant, who was really quiet, but clearly knew his stuff. And then when they were writing The Office, Steve Merchant came to see me at a gig to talk to me about the possibility of playing a part in The Office. I was being looked at for the role of Gareth, but he decided that Gareth spent the weekends volunteering for the army for the he was in the territorials, and Stephen didn't reckon I was manly enough for that. So they wrote a part because at that time Ricky Gervais, I'd met him a couple of times because he used to go to this comedy club I used to go to a lot. The 11 o'clock show, people used to go and drop in there. And so I met him a few times, and they wrote a part for me called Jimmy the Perv. I didn't get it. Then the second series, I auditioned for Count Furcula, and it was great. It was great fun. I remember walking to the audition, and Ricky Gervais goes, "Oh, I know this guy. He does impressions. Go on, do your Samuel L. Jackson." So I did my Samuel L. Jackson. Go on, do your Eminem. So I did Eminem, and it just felt like a really fun chat. And then I went out and then told her I got the part. So and when I
Amazing.
arrived on the day, arrived at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I got there. I only got a couple of lines. I've got my own trailer, and it just said the Count on the door. And I was like, wow, this is brilliant. And then I heard some swearing outside, and basically Ricky Gervais thought it was funny to give me Steve Merchant's trailer for the day. So I was given the trailer, and Steve Merchant had to sort of get changed wherever else. So I had that, and when we did the actual recording, it was in a pub in the outside was the Washington pub. The outside film, it was the Washington pub on in Hampstead, but the actual interior was filmed in Brentford in West London. And I remember they started to film, and Ricky Gervais's character only had one line to start with. It was meant to be, "Why did they call you Count Furcula?" And I was meant to say, "Because I can't stop shagging me, I can't stop." But I looked at Ricky Gervais and I just blanked. And I said the first thing that came into my mind, I went, because if I see something, I've got to fuck it. And there was a voice at the back went, "Cut, that's a keeper. We'll have a Steve Merchant." And basically that was it. They took that, and they like to change things anyway. They said, "No, just keep saying that line, it's funnier." And so we did a few more takes, and that was it, done, out the door.
Absolutely brilliant. What a story. Amazing. And, in terms of obviously that, from there on, you continued into the world of comedy, and it's taken you all over the place, haven't you? So I bet you've toured up and down the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people say they're quite well travelled around the world, but not many people take time to travel around this country. Quite lucky to sort of see, and places that you go, "Oh, get a bad rep," are always the places you're pleasantly surprised at. For example, Hull. People always take me at Hull. I went to Hull, been in Hull a couple of times. It's great, it's fantastic. But it's also about nowadays. It's about doing your research. For example, I was in Sheffield. I think it was around last September, and I was looking for a pub that's, it was start this year actually, looking for a pub that sold putty on draft. And I came across the Bear in Sheffield, and I thought I can double that up with trying to see Aston Villa at Sheffield United. Couldn't get in to see the game, so I went straight to the Bear, and I was feeling a bit down actually. I walked in, it was tipping down with rain, and I was welcomed in with loving arms, and met all these fantastic characters, and had a great day. Chatted about beer, was all kind of nerdy, beer and football. And I went off to my gig and said, "Oh, I'm back in a few weeks. I'll see you all in a few weeks." They went, yeah, whatever. 2 weeks later, I turned up again. "All right, lads, how's it going?" And they was like, what do you mean you're back again?" I told you I'd be back in 2 weeks. So it was that case of going into a city you don't know and suddenly having a local pub. So if you're watching or listening, the Bear Sheffield, hello. Hello, all you guys.
Well, it's a favourite of ours as well. It's won the Battle of the Boozers competition, which is run by Pints of Sheffield. It's won that in the past, and always comes in the top.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's a brilliant play. It was there at the weekend for the Abbeydale Road Beer Festival. They had the DDF Mars bar from Vault City.
I've seen that online. That looks incredible.
Yeah, they had that one on for the beer festival, which was a dangerous one for us to start on. But anyway,
how was it?
It was a great festival. It was brilliant. But it's over three days. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It was over 4 days this time. But because I didn't have much time, because I had other things booked in for the weekend, I had to do all of it in one day, which, as it has the last couple of years, ends badly for me. But no, I enjoyed it though, from what I can remember. So, But yeah, I mean that going back to what you're saying about that, the fact, as a comedian, you're going to be touring, you're going to be going about. I bet having this sort of craft beer interest now as well, and obviously had the cast beer interest before as well. I bet that really makes it a lot more enjoyable, because then you can really spend some
Yeah.
time looking at where to go.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I played a club in Windsor called Fuzzy Bear, and a lot of people, because it's sometimes full of stags and hens, it's a bit tasty. But I was quite enjoying there, and I was on first, so I was able to run out after my set, go around 2 side roads, and then go to the Two Flints Brewery and grab a couple of takeout cans for the train on the way home, and just have a quick look at it. So I'm able to just pop in and see things on the way. So I'll try and get to a place slightly early and go and have a look at something on the way back from, you know. I'll try and see things en route, as it were.
Excellent. So, I mean, like I said, what have you got plans? Are we going to be touring again soon?
Yes, so I've sort of been building up this show called Beers of a Clown,
Yeah.
and that's my stand-up show about beer. I did Brew York last weekend, so that was great fun, and I did it last year as well. So it was quite nice to go back and do it again. So they wanted me to do I did a straight 45 minutes then. So I often do either a straight 45 to an hour, or I have 2 half an hours, or I do 2 half an hours with a tasting. So Moore Brewery in Bristol, we added a tasting as well, which is great fun. So I'm hoping to sort of do a mini tour in the autumn. Well, I've already got about 10 dates in, and then a bigger tour next year. So that's the
Excellent. Well,
plan.
hopefully I'll get to see you at some point. We might cross paths, and there's a couple of little we're hopefully planning an Ale and Audio and Ale and Radio and a big meetup in Sheffield. We do it once a year. We've done it in the summer the last few years, but we're planning it for the autumn this time. And picking a particular bar in the sort of craft beer zone, what we call Kelham Island and Neeps End in Sheffield. So
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
we might be able to link in for that, and might be able
yeah.
to cross paths if we're in the same areas or whatever. But yeah, but there's something we definitely need to talk about, and this is brilliant, and the fact that you've done this as well. Tell us all about Lazy IPA.
Well, so it's a quite an interesting story. So what happened was, during the lockdown, I was posting about beer and doing beer videos, and getting more and more into it, and I was getting sent free samples. I was also doing a beer course, a beer tasting course rather, and then one particular thing, I was invited to a launch of Budvar's new lager. So I went along, and there's the brand ambassador called Radim. I can't pronounce his surname, Zanovich or something. And he was very engaging. He was very funny. I thought, wow, really launching a beer. It's a bit like doing a comedy set. So I thought, hang on, I can do that part of it. I can advertise it on Instagram. All I need to do is brew the beer. And so I contacted a friend of mine, Neil, who ran a comedy show, a comedy in a brewery sometimes. And we brewed our own beer in Brixton. And I'll tell you what, I've never brewed beer before. It's blooming difficult. Have you ever tried to brew your own beer?
I have in this shed, and eventually, after doing 2 brews, I decided it takes up too much space. It smells too
Yeah,
much, and it doesn't always work. So I decided to knock it on the head after a
exactly.
couple of goes. Yeah,
These guys make it look easy, but
yeah.
it's a lot more difficult than it is. So we basically had to get his head brewer, who used to work for Brewdog, to finish it off. So he finished it off. So I had about 60 cans, and they're all in black, so I didn't have a label. And then I was just doing my first beer shows, and I did a reveal where I produced my own beer and they tasted it. But that particular beer tasted a bit like quite a few beers I'd already tasted. It was early neck oil. Had Galaxy hops, citrus. I kind of felt like I tasted it already. And so when I met up with another brewer, I've got another friend of mine who's a brewer, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And we discussed what kind of beers we liked. And then we decided, right, let's do an English IPA. So we use all English hops. So I'm a big fan of Timothy Taylor's Landlord. So it's the same malt as that, it's Golden Promise. And we used all English hops. He brewed it, but he sort of explained the recipe to me. And then when we did the second one, I decided he always says, "What do you mean?" Brooke, his name is Brooke, from Brolly Brewing. What do you mean that you weren't happy with my first one? Well, I was very happy with it, but for my taste, I said, could we dial down the acidity and could we add a slightly more tropical note in it? For example, I was drinking quite a bit of Gypsy Hills Hepcat. It's got a nice tropical flavour in the middle. And so the next brewer, because he couldn't brew it, was Beston's Brewery in Surrey. And he suggested various hops, but I said, no, they're all American. I want English hop. He said, what, even one's grown here? I went, no, let's keep it to English. So he suggested Olicana. Looked in WhatsApp. I know that name, Olicana. I realised Villages Brewery, Bumps. I've had that before, loved it. So added that in, and that was Lazy Eye 2.0. So I called it Lazy IPA because I've got a lazy eye. And so those are my eyes. And that's a sort of cartoon version of my glasses. So it's a bit of fun, but I still tried to make it as best beer as I could. We made 450 cans because that's the many I thought I could drink in 6 months comfortably if it was disgusting. But no, it was a great success. The first lot sold out, and then we did the other batch. Then that sold out, and I'm just now discussing sort of trying to just scale it up. So the next batch might be 3,000 cans, but I'm just sort of talking to a brewery about that now.
Excellent, brilliant. I know Joe, the Brucal Pulse, tried it and is a big fan of it as well. But yeah, I do love the artwork. I love the name. It's got such a catchy name. Works so well and very sort of personal to you as well, which I really, really like. So yeah, congratulations on getting your own beer out there as well, because that's something that everybody sort of, especially everyone who's a beer lover, everybody would like to do something like that.
Yeah, well, it's great fun, and actual fact, like all these things that now I'm trying to book in for my third brew, I realise it's actually quite difficult to get your timing right. So I think it was like with my book for the the Pub Manifesto. I did a gig at a brewery and bumped into a camera member who said they had a publishing arm, and then I phoned up and I just happened to get through to the boss. And he said, send me a couple of chapters. Then we met for a beer and he said it was rubbish, but he could see potential, sent me away and I rewrote them. And then he said, now it's good, it's ready to publish. So I got very lucky that I got through to the right person. And then when I did my beer, I was very lucky. I timed my run perfectly when they had gaps in their brewing schedules. They're both the breweries I work with have since become more successful and they haven't got a clean slate. So I'm waiting to sort of try and fit in. So sometimes you can get a little bit lucky with these things, and you can time your run.
Absolutely brilliant. And of course, we're both now members of the British Beer Guild, aren't we? Was that something? Have you been in there for a few years or fairly recently for you as well?
Yes. So I joined. Well, I had my book published in November 2018, and Camera suggested I join and put my book forward for this competition of best book on pubs. So I put my book in and I got nominated for the best book on pubs that year. And so I joined the British. There again, I didn't know how prestigious that was. It was just, I just had the book and I joined. And then since I've tried to enter the competition, I've got nowhere near being nominated. But it's a brilliant thing. And what it was for me is you're just meeting like-minded people. I mean, personally, I find the Beerstagram community on Instagram is fantastic. I'm on Instagram with my comedy, and some comedians are supportive, but they're mostly in it for themselves. It's quite lonely in that regard. But with the beer community, everybody wants to share their beers. Brewers are very generous with their time. There's a real community that I haven't found anywhere else, to be honest with you. I'm blown away by it.
It is very nice, and like what we found with this and where this podcast started is that we had the pub shed sort of community and home bar community, but then that and the sort of craft beer community and all that have kind of merged together a little bit, because obviously everyone likes beers at home, but you can only have so much of the same sort of beer at home. So then everybody starts
Yeah.
experimenting and finding these craft beers, and that's where we go. So, and obviously you've been on Desert Island Beers before, but tell us what is your sort of go-to type of beer? Have you got a varied taste, or is this something you tend to go for mostly?
Well, it's kind of picking up what you said. It's kind of,
Mm.
I'm kind of tapping into this in my show. The first half is before the pandemic and the second half post-pandemic, because I really think it's affected the way we drink beer. For example, I used to love drinking beer in a cask beer, big cask beer fan. But with the lockdown, you had to order beer in cans, and suddenly it opened me up to the whole craft beer industry. And now I belong to a thing, Bruiser. I'm on a Bruiser mail order. So, for example, before Brew York, I could order up, 10 cans through Bruiser, and I can drink beer all over the country right from my home. So it's absolutely fantastic. I got sidetracked. What was your question?
Oh, I was asking you about your sort of your favorite sort of styles of go-to beer and things like that.
If it's cask beer and I'm going to a pub, I'll always go for sort of a Timothy Taylor's Landlord, or I do like a good, or if there's a good local beer. If I'm in Dorset, it's Badgers. I'll try whatever the local beer is to the area. In terms of craft beer, when it comes to lagers, my gateway beer was Lost Ground, which I think is an amazing lager for people who normally drink real ale. That's a fantastic sort of, it's a lager with a mouthfeel. When it comes to traditional lager, I love Budvar. I think it's a fantastic lager. And what's interesting is, because I grew up thinking, being told by my dad, because he grew up in a pub, how cask ale is amazing, that having studied a bit more about brewing, that I realised it's actually harder to brew a lager. It has to be so precise. I've got a newfound respect for these lagers, these German lagers and these Czech lagers, because it's so beautifully produced. Augustina Hell's, all these Shalenka, all these amazing lagers. And I'm full of admiration for it, because it's so complicated to get it exactly right. And
Excellent.
I met the head brewer from Budvar, fascinating guy, and he's a very precise scientist. Whereas all us guys going, I'm just doing a hazy IPA. There's so many room for mistakes. With my beer, for example, could make some serious errors and still get away with it. It's
you can't do that though with proper lager, can you? And
it's got to be exact.
Yeah, that's it. Brilliant. Well, it's been
So that's the lagers. With the there's too many to. For example, what I've been enjoying recently. I went away on holiday to Cornwall. We were fortunately very near to Verdant, so I went down to their tap room, and it was amazing to taste Light Bulb on tap.
Yeah.
And so had that craft beer, and then we were going down, taking the dog for a walk, going to local pubs for sort of an evening meal. And then I discovered, for example, I've always liked St Austell Tribute. Don't know if you've ever had that. But they had another beer that I've never had before called Hicks, and that was a 5% cask ale. It was just so smooth, a bit stronger, and just had a bit of more bite to it. Absolutely beautiful beer. Absolutely fantastic. Loved it.
Excellent. And for those people who want to find out what James's Desert Island beer is, you'll have to go check out Desert Island Beers and look for his episode. There is a separate podcast series for Desert Island Beers if you want to skip straight to it and go and find it. So yeah, search for that on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else like that. James, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. We'll have a quick chat after we've ended this little interview as well. But for everybody else who wants to find out more about James, and don't forget to give him a follow, that's Dowdeswell _drinks_comedy on Instagram. And obviously there you'll find all the links to his web pages, Lazy IPA. And of course, you'll be able to find out about when you can go and see him if he's on tour in your area and all that kind of thing. So yeah, there we go. James, thank you very much for chatting with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. One more thing. So I've got two Instagram accounts. So now my Lazy IPA one is my nerdy beer Instagram account, Lazy IPA, and my Dowdeswell Drinks Comedy is if it's funny, it goes in there. If it's nerdy, it goes in the Lazy IPA.
That's it. So yeah, I think we put that on screen earlier when we were playing some of your videos. But yeah, if you check out Lazy IPA as well, that's James's craft beer account. But then yeah, he's got his Instagram account as well for his comedy and so on. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, James. And we'll
And to
we'll
you,
speak after
and to
this.
you,
But yeah,
Jimbo.
cheers.
Cheers.